Welcome to No Better Death, the podcast that knows while you can die no better death than your own, that doesn't mean we can't take a look for the unusual and noteworthy in the deaths of others. Each episode will take an in-depth look at some out-of-the-ordinary deaths and the details surrounding them. This show will contain explicit language and graphic details. I am your host, Sick Grayson. What up, everybody? I hope you're all well and ready to hear about some dead shit. It did take a while to script this episode. I apologize for getting it to you late. Not that I've ever really gotten one out on time, but I took on some extra duties at work that I was led to believe wouldn't take up that much of my time, and it turned out to be a lie. I work in the IT department for a hospital that already supports the IT infrastructure of 6 other hospitals, in addition to hosting the servers for 10 more hospitals on top of those 6. And it got put on me to be the point of contact for support for those 10 locations if they don't have anybody on site locally, like someone's sick or goes on vacation. My boss neglected to tell me that 3 of these sites currently do not have local IT support, so right now I'm backing up more hospitals than I can count, and it's cutting into my research time. Plus, I've been in kind of a depressed funk lately, a stare at the wall to get through the workday and then come home and sit in the dark and listen to 9 Inch Nails kind of thing. So I haven't really been in the mood to record, but I'm feeling back to my normal, I can't ever say bubbly self, that's never me, but back to my normal depressed mood rather than my deeply depressed mood. But enough about that. We're going to get into an episode that really makes me wish I could afford to pay for other people's music on this show, because it would just be an hour-long loop of the Misfits song Horror Business, in which Danzig laments the turmoil of someone not wanting to go in the bathroom with him. I always take the lyrics to mean a girl wouldn't make out with him or something in the bathroom, but who knows. Danzig's a weird dude. He's 5'2", yet also built like Superman. He's like if you made a Superman homie. Remember the little homies from the 50 Cent machine? Anyway, could mean something else. I don't know. It's a dope song, and today we are talking about bathrooms, specifically people who died in bathrooms and probably should have had someone go in the bathroom with them. Bathrooms. They're fucking gross. I don't consider myself a germaphobe per se, but I do have some rules. Most of my germ rules revolve around kids because they're disease factories. But number 2, no pun intended, on my too many germs list is bathrooms. We take our numbers 1, 2, 3s all the way through number 7s into bathroom, and every modern building has them. Don't give me that bullshit about a business not having a bathroom. The employees poop somewhere. Germ-covered, stained, dusted in fecal matter with stagnant piss crusting into the grout and cracks and drips of period blood on the porcelain, and built with materials that seem chosen explicitly for their slipperiness so as to all but ensure you fall and crack your skull open. They kind of sound like a backwoods serial killer's kill room. It's enough to make me want to cut off my hands just so I don't have to touch the handle. But despite their nastiness, they're the best solution we've been able to come up with over the course of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and technological advancements. Everyone lucky enough to live in an area that has bathrooms uses them, so it stands to reason that with so many people collectively spending a large chunk of time in bathrooms over the course of their lives, someone at some point has to have died in the bathroom. In fact, many people have died in bathrooms, the most notable probably being Elvis, Tupelo, Mississippi represent, or Tywin Lannister. One of those people is fictional, and the other has a story so well known there's no need to recap it here on the show. So how do we die in bathrooms? Statistics indicate that slips and falls, usually in the tub or shower, drowning in the tub, and heart-related issues while pooping are the most common ways to give up the ghost in the loo. And get ready for me to say pooping a lot. Like, I'm not trying to be immature or gross or whatever, it's just we're talking about bathrooms, so it's gonna come up. In fact, most home-related injuries and injuries resulting in death at home come from falls and drowning, which happen to be mostly in the bathroom, with pools, of course, being a second major factor in drowning at home. Another common bathroom fatality is overdosing. Yep, people shoot up opioids in the bathroom alone, OD with no one knowing what's going on, and die on the bathroom floor. And that got me thinking about how we do drugs in general. You know, what is it about shooting up that makes it mandatory to do it in a bathroom? I've never shot up anything, so I don't have a real-life point of view on it. Is it because it's so obvious, or it involves blood, or is there some level of shame? I don't really get it. Weed is to be smoked communally. A tab of acid can be placed under the tongue and is a fun drug to do outside and around others. Shrooms are eaten, and again, a nice outside activity with others. Ecstasy is eaten or shoved up your butt and usually consumed with or in a crowd. Coke, of course, is an infamous club drug for the wealthy late 80s businessman a la American Psycho, but stuff like morphine and heroin seem to be a different beast. For some reason, you have to board yourself up in the bathroom like you're trying to keep zombies out, tie your arm off like you're going to cut it off, stab yourself in the crelbo or whatever that part of the arm is called. That's what Bart called it on Simpsons like 20 years ago, the crelbo. Then take a fucking nap during which you could die. I'm just thinking maybe if people did their heroin in the living room or the backyard or in a crowd of hundreds at a rave or something, maybe someone would be able to help when they start ODing and they wouldn't die in a bathroom, leaving all the bathrooms in this world haunted. I don't need your dead ass watching me while I take a shit. Who the fuck wants to be stuck haunting a bathroom anyway for all eternity? Slips, falls, drownings, ODs, and heart issues. There's actually medical science behind the last one. Why do so many people seem to drop dead while dropping a deuce? Taken from a 2016 Men's Health article. Elvis croaked while camped out on the John. Some say he had a heart attack caused by his drug habit, while others speculate it was his weight that did him in. But his personal physician introduced a different and controversial theory in his 2010 book, The King and Dr. Nick. He claimed the musician kicked it by straining too hard on his porcelain throne. Okay, 1, wasn't Dr. Nick the doctor from The Simpsons? And 2, the only medical professionals that should ever go by their first names are children's dentists. If your cardiologist wants you to call him doctor first name, get the fuck out. He's not a real doctor. Real doctors have a hubris shared by like high-ranking military officials and mad scientists where you have to refer to them in the most formal way possible. Strange as it may sound, there's a pretty well-established link between dropping a deuce and dropping dead. This guy stole my line. In fact, a Norwegian scientist published the first case report on the relationship back in 1968. Blame a rare condition called defecation syncope, a fancy term for the loss of consciousness or fainting that can occur while pooping. When we get ready to drop one, we instinctively employ a breathing technique known as the Valsalva maneuver, explains Dr. Satish Rao, MD, PhD, the director of Digestive Health Center at Augusta University. You essentially bear down to poop. You take in a deep breath and hold it before trying to exhale against your closed-off airway. This expands your lungs and pushes down your diaphragm. Your diaphragm, in turn, pushes down on your abdominal organs, which puts pressure on your pelvis. As a result, the muscles in your anus gently open up, allowing the stool to come out. Yeah, so far he's just explaining how pooping works. But when you hold your breath in this manner, several important changes are occurring elsewhere in your body. Since you're holding air in your lung cavity, you end up compromising your blood flow. As a result, less blood travels to your heart and to your brain, leading to a drop in blood pressure. This can cause you to become dizzy and to actually faint. And if blood flow to the heart is compromised, especially in someone who already has some artery blockage, that can be enough to trigger a heart attack. In healthy people, this physiological response isn't a problem. They're able to regulate the drop in blood pressure pretty quickly before feeling any symptoms. But people with heart disease or blood pressure disorders or who take meds for hypertension are more at risk. That's because the special receptors in their bodies that regulate blood pressure are already functioning less than optimally, making them less likely to be able to maintain proper blood flow. This in turn triggers a sympathetic response that causes blood pressure to spike. The combination of blood pressure spiking, which can lead to stroke or other problems, and the lack of blood being pumped to the heart, which starves the heart for oxygen and can eventually trigger a heart attack, leads to the not so uncommon situation of people dying on the toilet. Bottom line, healthy people don't have to worry about passing out while pooping, but those with heart disease or blood pressure problems may want to avoid excessive straining on the bowl. This intensifies your body's response to the Valsalva maneuver. A smart way to do it? Reduce your risk of constipation so stool comes out more smoothly with little straining. You can do that by upping the fiber in your diet. So that's the basic info on what we're dealing with here. Let's get into some stories. Before we hit the details on the first one, let me ask you a question. Where's the grossest place to use the bathroom? Truck stops? Maybe. Hole-in-the-wall ethnic food joints like all the rundown places here in Springs with absolutely delicious food but completely repulsing bathrooms? Those could be a contender. What about porta potties at music festivals? Now we're talking. Those have to be the grossest. You've got thousands of people shitting in them for days at a time, no soap or sanitizer, and most of the time, no toilet paper, baking in the summer heat with very little ventilation. They're the absolute worst. When I went to the gathering of the Juggalos, I pooped one time in 4 days. I noticed that the porta potty cleaners, yes, luckily they did have the shit truck come through and clean them out a few times. I noticed they came through at like 6 in the morning, so I got up early one day, waited for the truck to come through and clean one out, and then I used it. For the entire rest of the time, I didn't number 2, and if I could avoid it, I didn't number 1 either. I went into the woods and did number 1 if I had to. But festival porta potties are disgusting. So of course, that's where we should start with the story of UK politician Christopher Shale and his unfortunate demise at the Glastonbury Festival. Christopher Shale was born August 23, 1954, making him 57 at the time of his age, senior discount age, and he was holding it down at a music festival. Pretty dope. He was a British businessman and conservative politician. He was chairman of the West Oxfordshire Conservative Association and a close associate of Prime Minister David Cameron. Wow, impressive. Did he also know the Duke of Kensingtonshire Vilchester? Anyway, David Cameron praised him for his massive contribution to the Conservative Party both locally and nationally. Big league shit. Shale was educated at Great Houghton Preparatory School, I guess he couldn't get into Hogwarts, and Oakham School in Rutland. He was then commissioned as a British Army officer. After leaving the Army, he joined Durden Smith Communications and became the chief executive of SGL Communications. In 1990, he then became the founder and managing director of Oxford Resources, a business supply consultancy. So this dude was all business and politics. Shale lived in Overwharton, a village near Chipping Norton in Oxfordshire, with his wife Nikki. The couple had a son, Albie Shale, and he was stepfather to Nikki's 2 children from their first marriage to Count Alessandro Mepelli Mozzi. He saved her from a vampire. We all know that counts are vampires. Count Dracula, Count Chocula, Count from the Muppets, etc., etc. In June 2011, days before his death, he was critical of the British Conservative Party in a strategy document that was leaked to the newspaper Mail on Sunday, saying that they came across as graceless, voracious, crass, and always on the take. That statement leaked mere hours before his death. So a little bit of background on Glastonbury. Glastonbury Festival, considered by many Brits to be if not the, major festival in British culture that can trace some of its roots back to 1914 when composer Rutland Boughton established a summer school in the town of the same name. This summer school, rife with lectures and recitals, attracted a bohemian audience but seemed to call it quits in 1926. Fast forward to the 70s, hippie influence hits England as well as the concept of the music festival. 1970 and 1971 saw small festivals near Glastonbury, with the festival using the name Glastonbury Festival for the first time in 1979. The 1980s saw the festival becoming an annual event, and it has grown every year since, with pretty much every band performing there and around 175,000 people attending each year. 2019 will mark the festival's 36th year. In addition to music, the festival also hosts dances, comedy, theater, circus, cabaret, and other arts. Not really sure why a 57-year-old conservative politician would have been attending what seems to be a liberal-oriented festival. Maybe it's just such a part of the culture that it's a you have to be there kind of thing regardless of your age or politics. Maybe he wanted to see the bands that year. And who was there in 2011? U2, Coldplay, Paul Simon, Radiohead, Beyonce, and Wu-Tang Clan. Oh, right there. That explains it then. He wanted to see Meth and Red and Raekwon and RZA and GZA and Ghostface. Christopher got the news that his statement had leaked, and shortly thereafter he disappeared. We know he's dead, and in a situation like his, it would be easy to assume suicide over the leaked statement or assassination. But it was neither of those. So what happened? Shale had attended the festival with friends and family, staying in a motorhome at a farm next to the main festival site. On June 24th, that's my birthday, He had complained of feeling unwell and the day after of shortness of breath, which he put down to his asthma. Shale was last seen at 12:40 p.m. on June 25th by his friends Arthur and Rupert Soames. Shale complained of feeling unwell and said he was going to use one of the nearby toilets. He failed to turn up for lunch with friends and family or make contact that afternoon and evening, his wife eventually reporting him missing very early the following day on June 26th, saying she last saw him near the Avalon stage at the festival. When Rupert Soames heard the next morning that Shale was missing, he retraced his steps and came across a locked toilet whose occupant would not respond when he knocked. Breaking in, he found Shale dead, bloodied from a burst vessel in his nose. An investigation was launched and concluded that Christopher was overweight and asthmatic. Pathologist Dr. Basil Perdue told the inquest that Shale's weight had put an excessive workload on his heart. He had a heart attack in a porta potty at a music festival while dropping a deuce and marinated in the hot, stinky, piss and shit-filled sweat box for 18 hours. Where does this fall on the list of ways to die? It certainly isn't the absolute worst, but it's definitely not a good look. There's more dignified ways to die or be found, right? This is why someone at SNL wrote that skit about the ejector seat toilet that launches you across the room if you die on the toilet, so no one finds you slumped over the toilet, pants around your ankles with a turtle head poking out. Shale's widow, Nikki, rejected media speculation that her husband had taken his own life. Speaking after the inquest, she said, "It was always obvious to us and confirmed very soon afterwards that my husband, my darling husband, died of natural causes. It has been a cause of great regret to our children, to Chris's family, and all of our friends that so much inaccurate speculation has appeared in the media with regard to the circumstances of his death. This has really not helped us at a very, very difficult time. We now need to move forward with the rest of our lives." Prime Minister Cameron described Shale as a valued friend, a big rock in his life, and stated that he was devastated by the loss. And that's Christopher Shale, everyone, a man who, by all accounts, worked his ass off to get where he was, to rise above the humble beginnings to some position of power and affluence, only to die a pauper's death. What do I always say? The great equalizer. Next up, we take a look at Robert Pastorelli. If the name sounds familiar, it's because he was a bit part actor in like every TV show of the 80s and early 90s, with his first major recurring role being his character Eldon Bernecki on over 100 episodes of Murphy Brown. He also played Joe Loop, the hitman Vince Vaughn hires in the movie Be Cool, which I really dig. Unfortunately, he wasn't just an actor, he was also a drug addict and possible murderer struggling with mental health issues. Robert Joseph Pastorelli was born June 21, 1954 in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and raised in Edison, New Jersey. He planned on being a professional boxer but had to abandon sports after a near-fatal car crash at 19. He formed a narcotics addiction in his late teens, early 20s, possibly due to the medications he was on after the crash. He was able to overcome this addiction, at least for long enough to launch an acting career, though he would relapse from time to time. Pastorelli entered acting via New York City Theater in the late 1970s after studying at the New York Academy of Theatrical Arts and the Actors Studio, financially maintaining himself working as a bartender. He made his stage debut in 1977 in a production of Rebel Without a Cause. He also performed in productions of The Rainmaker and Death of a Salesman. Later in his career, he performed at London's South Bank Theater in A Streetcar Named Desire. In 1982, Pastorelli headed west to Los Angeles seeking opportunities in Hollywood. Spending the early 1980s employed in television bit part appearances, he found a niche playing streetwise characters, appearing also in supporting roles in Outrageous Fortune and Beverly Hills Cop 2. His first substantial role came with Dances with Wolves in 1990. His first big break in television came in the role of the gruff but lovable house painter Eldon on the series Murphy Brown, and he stayed with the show for 7 seasons. Murphy Brown producer Diane English was so impressed with his abilities that she worked with him to produce his first starring vehicle, the television sitcom Double Rush, which only lasted 1 season. 2 years later, he starred in the American adaptation of the British detective series Cracker. As his TV career gained momentum, he got more roles in films. He was in Sister Act 2, and in 1993 he played a serial killer in the mystery thriller Striking Distance, but it wasn't very successful commercially. He was in Eraser with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was in the movie Michael with, I'm drawing a blank. Vince Vega. John Travolta, I knew I'd get it. And Modern Vampires in 1998. This rise to success would take a sudden and sharp decline following the events of March 15, 1999. On that evening, around 9:50 p.m., during an incident at his Hollywood home, Pastorelli's 25-year-old girlfriend, Sharaman Janovich, was killed by a gunshot to the head. During the authorities' investigation that followed, Pastorelli testified that in the midst of an argument between the two of them, she suddenly produced a handgun, possibly not knowing it was loaded, and killed herself. Their 1-year-old daughter was asleep in the next room. The incident was investigated as an accident or suicide, and the LA coroner's office declared the cause of death undetermined. Pastorelli was originally exonerated of responsibility for her death and received public expressions of sympathy within Hollywood and from the Los Angeles media. But his career went into a noticeable decline afterwards, so even though he was found not guilty of doing anything, people weren't really jumping to hire this guy. He appeared in 2 more cinema productions in small roles in the early 2000s, as well as some minor supporting roles in TV. He developed a friendship with the actress Glenn Close towards the end of his career and appeared alongside her in the television films The Ballad of Lucy Whipple and South Pacific. The next year, he again appeared alongside her at London's Royal National Theatre in a performance of Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire. In 2002, he co-founded the Garden State Film Festival. His posthumous final screen appearance was in the movie Be Cool in 2005. Despite originally being ruled out as a suspect, in the weeks leading up to his death, police had begun to suspect that Robert may have murdered his girlfriend, citing new evidence that discredited his original story, and intended to arrest him in the coming weeks. However, they weren't able to do so as Robert's death came very soon after he received that news. Pastorelli's assistant found him dead in the bathroom on the morning of March 8, 2004, with a syringe, a spoon, and a plastic bag containing white powder near his body. The autopsy concluded the cause of death was acute morphine poisoning. He was 49 years old. A few months after his death, both cases were closed, with Janovich's cause of death being changed to homicide, citing staging of the crime scene and scientific evidence that the firearm was handled after discharge. In June 2018, a jailhouse informant stated that Robert and his girlfriend may have been offed by an organized crime ring over debts run up by Robert and the fear that he was going to turn himself in and give evidence against his debtors in exchange for immunity. Police have considered reopening the investigation, but so far there doesn't seem to be any word on whether or not they've taken the informant's statements seriously. So, kind of a Sid and Nancy thing going on there. You got a dead girlfriend and a guy who was on a lot of drugs, and any number of things that really could have happened. Both of them are dead. We'll never really know. And with that, we're going to get into 5 fast facts about bathrooms. 1. The average person spends at least 92 days of their lifetime in the bathroom, though for some this number can be as large as 3 years, and I'm probably one of those. I don't primp in front of the mirror or anything, but when I gotta go, I gotta go. I'm in there for a while. It's just the way my body works. Don't shame me. I wish I could be like most of y'all and I'm in and out in 5 minutes, but I'm more of a 30 to 45 minute kind of guy, so I'm probably looking at spending at least 3 years of my life in the bathroom. 2. There is a toilet-themed park. That's right, and not a toilet theme park, but a toilet-themed park. South Korea opened Restroom Cultural Park in 2012. It features a toilet-shaped museum, toilet sculptures, toilet-related art, and many, many bathroom facts. It was built around the home of Sim Jae-duk, who was the founder and first president of the World Toilet Association. Admission is free. Sweet deal. And I looked into this, and if you're a fan of the classic sculpture The Thinker, you might want to check this place out because they have a sculpture of the Thinker on the toilet. 3. There are many places in Europe that do not have bathrooms in businesses, so pay toilets have been established, and you can buy a daily or weekly pass, and you can pay online right from your phone. No more standing in lines or at a kiosk to wait to pay the used bathroom. You can do it all on your phone. 4. The UK. You guys are in the top 5 countries that listen to this show. You need to wash your hands. Studies show that 70% of Brits do not wash their hands properly or at all after using the bathroom. And see, this is why I open doors with my shirt sleeve. The biggest issue here seems to be that they don't use soap. Okay, whatever. The facts are really that the heat of the water and the rubbing of your hands is what kills most of the bacteria. The soap is the least impactful part of washing your hands, but still, just wash your hands, guys. Lava tu manos, por favor. This is why England gets all the nasty diseases that don't exist anymore, because they kill everyone that gets them, like English sweating sickness that was so gnarly it wiped out everyone that had it. And didn't the plague start there too, because they just threw shit and piss and garbage and whatnot into the streets? From the country that invented the concept of privy or privacy so no one could see them not washing their hands, I guess. I'm not ragging on the English, okay? I love Prodigy and the young ones, 'cause we may not be the young ones very long. I even get down to some Professor Elemental from time to time. Example, love that dude. Perfect Replacement is my jam. Your food's kind of shit, but whatever. Not hating on England, but seriously, start washing your hands. 5. The oldest bathtub discovered dates back to 1500 BC, the Minoan epoch, and was designed for the Queen's bathroom in the Palace of Knossos in Crete. And that is the 5 fast facts about bathrooms. Next story, perhaps the most hardcore in this episode, and one in which the conclusion doesn't provide much closure. Albert Dekker. Thomas Albert Eck van Dekker, aka Albert Dekker or Albert Van Dekker, was born December 20th, 1905 in Brooklyn, New York. He appeared in stage productions while in high school and later bailed on medical school to pursue acting, with his professional debut being in Cincinnati, 1927. Within a few months of that debut, he would be performing on Broadway. Dekker spent a decade in theater before heading to Hollywood in 1937. He would appear in his first film that same year, so it sounds like dude was killing it. He would spend the rest of his career in film, other than a return to stage during a period of his career when he was blacklisted from Hollywood. Dekker appeared in some 70 films and over 15 TV shows in the 1930s to the 1960s, but his 4 most famous screen roles were as a mad scientist in the 1940 horror film Dr. Cyclops, as a criminal mastermind in The Killers, as a dangerous dealer in atomic fuel in the 1955 film Kiss Me Deadly, and as an unscrupulous railroad detective in Sam Peckinpah's western The Wild Bunch. In 1959, he played a convincing Texas Ranger, Captain Rucker, in The Wonderful Country. He was rarely cast in romantic roles, but in the film Seven Sinners, featuring a romance between Marlene Dietrich and John Wayne, Dietrich sails off with Dekker's character at the end of the film. Dekker's role as Pat Harrigan in The Wild Bunch would be his last screen performance. In April 1957, Dekker's 16-year-old son John shot himself with a .22 rifle at the family's home in Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. He had reportedly been working on a silencer for the rifle for over a year, and his death was ruled accidental. Off-screen, Dekker had an interest in politics that led to him winning a seat in the California State Assembly in 1944, where he served as a Democrat and was a very outspoken critic of Senator Joseph McCarthy's red baiting tactics. This was during the Cold War, and McCarthy was known for spearheading a witch hunt for communists in the U.S., which Dekker didn't like. Not that he was communist, he just didn't like the paranoia that Red Panic inspired and the mistreatment of American citizens who were suspected, often incorrectly, of being communist. His criticism of McCarthy led to him being blacklisted in Hollywood for over a decade. During this time, he returned to theater and did quite a bit of lecturing around the country. He was able to return to Hollywood in his lifetime, however, this return would be short-lived. Albert Dekker would be found dead on May 5, 1968. And this next section is taken from Laurie Jacobson's Hollywood Heartbreak, the tragic and mysterious deaths of Hollywood's most remarkable legends. Albert Dekker, still dapper at 63, and his longtime fiancée Geraldine Saunders made a distinguished couple. The cultured actor's marriage to the svelte fashion model was set for less than a month away. Aw man, they were going to get married soon. On Thursday evening, May 2nd, 1968, they attended the opening of Zero Mostel's new play, The Latent Heterosexual, at Hollywood's Huntington Hartford Theater. He was in fine spirits, Saunders said in a later interview. We were going to go out again on Friday, but my numerous phone calls to him that evening went unanswered. Indeed, the next time she would see Dekker would neither be distinguished nor alive. When Saturday night passed with still no word from Albert, his fiancée grew increasingly concerned. First thing Sunday morning, she went to his Hollywood apartment at 1731 North Normandy, only to find his door covered with notes from friends who were also trying in vain to contact him. She slipped a note of her own under the door. When she returned that evening and found it still in place, she immediately went to the manager. The manager opened the front door, which had been locked but not bolted. Everything seemed to be in order until they tried to open the bathroom door. It was chained from the inside. They forced it open, and Saunders passed out. It was so horrible, she said. The 6 feet, 3 inch, 240-pound Dekker was kneeling nude in the bathtub, a dirty hypodermic needle sticking out of each arm. A hangman's noose was around his neck, but not tight enough to have strangled him. A scarf was tied over his eyes, and something like a horse's bit was in his mouth. Fashioned from a rubber ball and metal wire, the bit had chain reins that were tightly tied behind his head. 2 leather thongs were stretched between the leather belts that girded his neck and chest. A third belt around his waist was tied with a rope that stretched to his ankles, where it had been tied in some kind of lumber hitch. The end of the rope, which continued up his side, wrapped around his wrists several times and was held in Dekker's hand. Both wrists were clasped by a set of handcuffs. Written in lipstick, above the 2 hypodermic punctures on his right buttock, was the word whip and drawings of the sun. Sun rays had also been drawn around his nipples. Make me suck was written on his thorax, and slave and cocksucker on his chest. On his lower abdomen was drawn a vagina. He had apparently been dead since Friday, and his awkward position had colored his lower body a deep blood purple. This one has everything but a vampire bite, remarked a deputy coroner. During the brief investigation, detectives noted that there were no signs of forced entry or a struggle. They labeled the death indicated suicide, quite an unusual case. Finding no convincing evidence for suicide, the coroner rejected that theory. His final report said accidental death, not a suicide. Another of Dekker's respected colleagues, Paul Lucas, empathetically defended his friend. Al would never have left the world in such shambles. He was a man of culture and breeding. Dekker had been a happy man. He was a well-known intellectual and student of classical literature, a poet and a sculptor. Lucas was sure that he was murdered. It was a complete, grotesque, horrible puzzle to his friends. In April of 1968, just a month before his death, he completed a role in Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch. Peckinpah, William Holden, Ernest Borgnine, and Robert Ryan were still on location in Mexico when they got word about Dekker. They all agreed that suicide was out of the question. He was the life of the set, they said. He'd entertain them day and night with his endless dialects and stories. Technically, the details of Dekker's horrendous finish began to look more and more like the work of an assassin. The police said he had been found bound and handcuffed, and they listed the death as a suicide. Another obvious question was, if Dekker had been alone, how could he have legibly written on his own backside? The police confirmed he had been injected with a drug, but after 3 days it was unidentifiable. And many believe that Albert could have been bound and choked only if he was unconscious. After all, he was a very large, healthy man quite capable of defending himself against an attacker. And the puzzle had one more potentially significant clue. Al was very trusting. He flew home from Mexico with all his pay, $30,000. His girlfriend, or fiancée, said we were about to close a deal on a house in the Encino Hills. Al was staying alone at the Normandy Street apartment until our house went through escrow. He'd only lived there a week. Also in the apartment was $40,000 from 2 television rolls. Dekker was using straight cash as bargaining leverage for the house they were going to buy. When he died, his fiancée explained, the whole $70,000 went missing. I think it was someone he knew and let into the apartment. Dekker chose the Normandy Street building because a friend managed it. That friend disappeared after Dekker's death, and Saunders has always believed that he had something to do with it. Also missing were some expensive camera equipment and his tape recorder, which he'd been using to prepare for a role he'd been offered in Fiddler on the Roof. Police toyed with the theory that Dekker was a closet homosexual who practices eccentricities very discreetly with anonymous male prostitutes, and that this time something had gone wrong and the frightened partner had quietly let himself out. They made inquiries, but Dekker had no reputation among male hustlers, nor did any of his friends consider him the least bit kinky. So they're trying to make this sound kind of like Ramon Navarro's death, where this secretly gay Latin lover type, I mean, if you guys remember the story, he would have male prostitutes come over, engage with them, pay them, and they'd leave, but then one day two came over, killed him, and took all his stuff. But that doesn't seem to be what happened here, but the police are saying it could have been something like that. However, Los Angeles County Coroner Thomas Noguchi had a theory of his own: autoerotic asphyxia, a surprisingly prevalent sexual practice in which orgasm is achieved by chancing death. Noguchi explained that during the solitary experience, the victim is almost always handcuffed, sometimes blindfolded, and some don transvestite clothing. The rope is rigged as a pulley that the participant can control, but things can go wrong. That's the risk. But no one could ever prove Noguchi's theory. It's entirely possible that the murderer arranged the whole bizarre tableau. In reflecting on the puzzle and all of its pieces, one detective admitted to Saunders that Dekker was slickered. What the hell does that even mean? But she couldn't get the police to reverse the accident decision. The case is closed to further inquiry, and the death of scholarly Albert Dekker remains a frustrating, confounding mystery. Okay. So in my younger days, I was known to dabble quite a bit in kink, and I can tell you this guy did not put himself in this position. He didn't tie the ropes, he didn't write on himself, he didn't put the needles in his arm, nor the gag in his mouth. He had help getting into this position or was placed into it against his will. Something is up here. No signs of a struggle, though. It sounds like he was either quickly and cleanly subdued by someone he knew, though at his size that seems sort of unlikely, or he was voluntarily participating in what he thought was some fun, consensual kink with a trusted partner that turned out not to be as much fun or as trustworthy as he thought. This was not, I repeat, this was not autoerotic asphyxiation. The report says the noose wasn't even tight enough to have strangled him, and he hadn't ejaculated. Plus, this was a 62-year-old man, 62, 63. Would he have been up for that kind of rope play shenanigans at his age? Unfortunately, the only people that know what happened are Albert, who can't tell us what went down, and his assailant or assailants, who aren't ever going to tell us what happened if they're even still alive to tell anyone. And it was just weird enough, and possibly, though not really proven, but possibly slightly gay enough for the cops at the time to not want to investigate it. If this happened today, a famous actor and politician gets killed, the FBI or CIA is going to send multiple undercover agents into Hollywood's BDSM scene to try to get leads and track down suspects. But in the 60s, they weren't doing that. They were still trying to wrap their heads around serial killers. Something like this was way out of their league. So rather than attempt a proper investigation, they took the coroner's statement that required the least amount of work, that being autoerotic asphyxiation, and closed the case. But to me, this case is not closed. $70,000 in camera equipment were missing. Someone who managed the building disappeared right after this death, and they never even bothered to investigate it. He didn't lose $70,000 cash and his camera equipment, then choke himself to death in what would have been the most embarrassing way possible for a man of his time and position to be found in. Who did it? Why did they do it? What was their relationship with him? What was in the needles? And what the hell happened? So many questions. We'll probably never know the answer to them. I have to believe that with modern crime scene analysis, updated forensics, and DNA testing, something could be found out today if the cops would just reopen the case. Yes, it probably involves shady activity and seedy characters. Yes, it may find things that could tarnish his reputation as a heterosexual icon of 1940s Hollywood. But how much of whatever he was involved in then has been normalized by now, right? It wouldn't really seem that shocking today. In my opinion, the police owe it to Albert, his family, and the general public to look into this again. The cause of death on record is bullshit, and someone got away with murdering this man and stealing from him, his fiancée, and his family. I think of all the cases I've covered so far on this show, this is one that needs to be reopened. It is covered in question marks and was clearly marginalized by the police due to their Puritan discomfort with the subject matter. Justice for Albert. Alright, up next, story number 4. At this point in scripting the episode, choosing the next story is difficult. We're getting into a lot of bathroom overdoses, which is as common as they come, and we've already covered one. Oh, you know what? Let's go down a quick list of bathroom deaths I can't really cover in detail, then we'll hit the last story on the way out. One thing I learned about looking into less than modern bathroom deaths is that assassins used to wait for their victim to go to the bathroom or would straight up just hide in the toilet. 581 BC, Chinese Duke Jing of Jin died falling into a toilet pit. Not sure if he drowned in what was in there or the pit was just that deep. I don't even know what the hell a toilet pit is. 1016, King Edmund II of England is stabbed from under his toilet seat while pooping. 1076, Godfrey IV, Duke of Lower Lorraine, was assassinated while defecating. 1306, Wenceslaus III of Bohemia was murdered with a spear while sitting in the garter-robe, or the bathroom. 1578, Yusugi Kenshin was assassinated while using the toilet. Legendary comedian Lenny Bruce, beloved actress Judy Garland, and king of rock and roll Elvis Presley all overdosed and died in bathrooms in 1966, 69, and 77 respectively. In 1996, writer, director, producer Don Simpson, best known for his work on Flashdance, Beverly Hills Cop, Top Gun, and The Rock, overdosed in the bathroom. And how many others? We got Whitney Houston, her daughter Bobby Christina Brown, both dead in the bathroom from a combination of drugs, alcohol, and drowning. Wrestler Eddie Guerrero died of heart failure while brushing his teeth. Model/bounty hunter Domino Harvey OD'd on fentanyl in the bathroom. Obviously, Nancy Spungen of Sid and Nancy fame, but that one is way too messy and unresolved to even attempt to cover on here. Jim Morrison died in the bathroom. Shit, even Orville Redenbacher. Yes, the bespectacled, nerdy, old man of popcorn fame who was on our TVs all the time as the face of the self-titled popcorn company in those commercials back in the day when we were kids, had a heart attack and drowned in the bathtub. Death, we are surrounded by it. Even the TV is dead. Okay. So this leaves me with two stories. One should have a bit of detail to it. The other could go either way. It could be a full story or it could just be one paragraph I tack on at the end. We'll see how time goes. Let's go to Japan and look at the story of rock star Hideto Matsumoto. While I do have an extensive knowledge of music, I don't know much Japanese stuff other than Balzac, which is a Japanese horror punk band. They're like J Misfits, but that's about all I know from Japan. I wasn't familiar with this next band or artist. Hideto Matsumoto, known by his stage name Hyde, was born December 13th, 1964 in some place I cannot pronounce, Japan. He was first exposed to rock music at the age of 15 when he heard Alive by Kiss. Ace Frehley immediately became his biggest influence. And what do I always say? Even if you don't like Kiss, your favorite musicians love Kiss. That same year, his grandmother bought him his first electric guitar, a Gibson Les Paul Deluxe. Ooh, nice. In high school, he joined band but quit a few weeks in because he was assigned the clarinet when he wanted to play the trumpet. After quitting band, he concentrated on guitar and formed his first band, Saber Tiger. Within a year, they were playing shows all over the city of Yokosuka. In 1983, he started studying cosmetology and fashion at the Hollywood University of Beauty and Fashion, from which he graduated and acquired a beautician's license in 1984. In 1985, Saber Tiger released their self-titled EP. In '86, they changed their name to Saber Tiger to avoid confusion with a similarly named band. Hyde grew tired of the constantly changing lineup and ended that band in 1987. Around this time, he was invited to join the band X, which would become X Japan. He accepted the offer in February of that year and became the band's lead guitarist and occasional songwriter. The band released an album in April 1988 and toured extensively to promote it. The band was already on a path to mainstream success despite being on an independent label. They were also pioneering visual kei, the use of elaborate makeup, costumes, and hair. To put it simply, they started Japan's version of what we in America called glam rock or glam metal. They released their second album/first major label album in April 1989, which debuted at number 6 on Japanese charts and won a few awards. Their third album was released July 1991 and debuted at number 1, selling over 600,000 copies. Shortly after the release of the third album, the band took a break to focus on solo projects and seemed to have shed the glam image. Well, everyone but Hyde, who continued to perform in wild, colorful outfits and dyed hair. Their fourth and final album was released November 1996. Yeah, 96, glam is all but dead. A few 80s acts are still refusing to give it up and still touring attempting to keep it alive, but after Nirvana's Nevermind made its way around the world, it was time to give up the glam look and decide what direction your music should go in, but Hyde didn't really want to let glam die. Their last album also hit number 1. In September 1997, the band announced it would be breaking up and played its last show at Tokyo Dome on December 31st, 1997. And these guys weren't bad. I checked out some of their music, and it reminds me of Iron Maiden, maybe a little Judas Priest, heavy guitars and drums, high-pitched singing, very emotional piano parts, a lot of starting off soft on the piano and building up to like that 80s metal glory. It's decent. Not really my thing, but decent if you're into that kind of stuff. We're not talking about a hack band here. These guys were the biggest band in Japan, and for good reason. They were super talented. Hyde had been working on solo stuff since 1993, and in 1994 had released his first solo album, Hide Your Face, which was a departure from the speed metal of ex-Japan and leaned more toward alternative rock, so he was able to keep up with the changes in music. He started his own label and oversaw the release of the bands on it, such as Zeppet Store. He released a second solo album in '96 and started another band named Zilch, which included members Joey Castillo, who has been in many bands, Queens of the Stone Age, just to name one, Paul Raven from Killing Joke, and Ray McVeigh of The Professionals. How have I never heard of this band? It's got Paul Raven and Joey Castillo. Anyway, his side projects, and the bands on his label recorded and released music and performed all through the 90s, so he had a healthy solo career in his successful label. Ex-Japan wasn't the end of his career as a musician. It sounded like things were going well for him as the millennium approached, and yet Hyde wouldn't live to see the millennium. He was found dead on the morning of May 2nd, 1998. Understand this, to put it in an American perspective, this man's death would be the equivalent of if Slash had killed himself at the height of Guns N' Roses' popularity. Ex-Japan, like I said, was the biggest band of the decade, and Hyde was considered by many in Japan to be the greatest guitarist, period. After a night out drinking, his girlfriend found him strangled by a ripped towel tied to the bathroom doorknob in his apartment in Tokyo. He had returned to Japan just 5 days earlier after a 3-month stay in Los Angeles. On May 1st, he and the members of Spread Beaver, his backing band, recorded for television shows and went out drinking afterwards, with his brother driving him home at roughly 6:30 in the morning. He was found unconscious at 7:30 a.m. and was taken to a hospital where he was pronounced dead at 8:52. Authorities officially deemed Hyde's death a suicide, and it was reported in the media as such. Within a week, 3 teenage fans had died in copycat suicides. That's how much people in Japan loved this guy. Do we know if anyone killed themselves when Kurt Cobain or John Lennon died? Probably not, but fans in Japan took Hyde's death very seriously. At the wake on May 6th, 10,000 people attended. A 19-year-old girl slit her wrists after laying flowers at the temple, and a car crash caused by sleep-deprived fans traveling from Osaka caused 1 death and 7 injuries on a motorway. His remains were buried in Miura during a Buddhist memorial service. Approximately 50,000 people attended his funeral on May 7th, where 56 people were hospitalized and 197 people received medical treatment in first aid tents due to a mixture of emotional exhaustion and heat, with the funeral taking place on the warmest day of the year at that point, 80.6 degrees Fahrenheit. 80 degrees. You're passing out from heat at 80 degrees. That's long pants weather where I'm from in Mississippi. 80 degrees isn't shit, but these people were passing out. This funeral was so big, they had medical tents set up. This was the size of a festival for this guy. That's how important he was. Several of Hyde's friends and colleagues stated that they believed the strangulation was part of an accident, autoerotic asphyxiation. Among those who believed this was ex-Japan co-founder Yoshiki and former ex-bassist Taji. This notion is supported by the fact that no suicide note was left, and Taji theorizes in his autobiography that on the night of his death, Hyde may have been practicing a technique to relieve upper back and neck pains, which guitarists can suffer from after continuous use of a shoulder strap. So maybe he's thinking maybe that's what it was. The technique involved was practiced by the ex-Japan members during their touring days and required the use of a towel and a doorknob or a handle. According to Taji, Hyde may have fallen asleep in his intoxicated state, becoming caught and strangling himself. So they're saying he either, autoerotic asphyxiation, or he was trying to pull up on something. I don't know. Zilch bassist Paul Raven said, "I saw him a few days before he passed away, and I had no indication from him that anything was wrong other than he was so exhausted." But he did comment that Hyde was under a lot of stress due to the recording schedule for an album he was working on, so we don't really know. Was it suicide? Was it jack in action going wrong? Or was he just trying to pop his back? I have back problems, and I twist myself into all kinds of weird positions and grab a number of different tools while trying to pop this one spot kind of in the lower middle of my back. And I have used a towel, though it didn't involve anything near my neck. So I can kind of see that, if I put pressure here, stretch this way, then twist, it'll pop, and oh shit, I just, broke my neck or back or hung myself. I can kind of see that point, but who knows? I mean, if his dick was out, obviously it was one thing, but it doesn't sound like it was, so again, I highly doubt autoerotic asphyxiation. Later that month, after his passing, the single Pink Spider was released, entering charts at number 1. The song was also named Song of the Year at the 13th Japan Gold Disc Awards and received the MTV Video Music Award in the category Japan Viewer's Choice. Sales were also strong for the follow-up singles Everfree and Rocket Dive. American journalist Neil Strauss commented on the trend, saying that in just a few weeks, pop culture in Japan had gone from mourning Hyde's death to consuming it. Zilch's debut album 321 was released in July of that year and hit number 2 on charts. The group would continue to perform and record for several years. While they never achieved mainstream success in the US, one of their songs was included on the soundtrack for Heavy Metal 2000. Despite Hyde's death, Spread Beaver, his backing band, went through with the 1998 Tribal Jah Zoo tour from October through November, performing live with the addition of recordings, drawing an audience of 50,000 people. Footage from the tour was later released on DVD in 2005. On May 1, 1999, a tribute album was released titled Tribute Spirits. It features covers of Hyde songs by several bands such as Buck Tick, Luna Sea, and Oblivion Dust, and solo artists including Japanese names I can't pronounce. The album was released to coincide with the first anniversary of his death. A Hyde museum was opened in his hometown of Yokosuka on July 20, 2000. It has been reported that Japan's prime minister at the time was influential in getting it built, as he was a big fan of ex-Japan. The museum remained open past its original 3-year plan for 5 years before closing its doors in 2005 with an estimated 400,000 people visiting. Prior to his death, Hyde and Yoshiki talked about restarting ex-Japan with a new vocalist in the year 2000. The surviving members of ex-Japan eventually reunited in 2007 and recorded a new song, IV. It contains a previously unused guitar track by Hyde. Their first concert was held at the Tokyo Dome on March 28, 2008. During the performance of Art of Life, a hologram of Hyde played alongside the band. Ex-Japan still considers Hyde a member and have introduced him at every concert they have performed since reuniting. Since then, there has been no shortage of cover songs, memorial albums, memorial shows, documentaries, biographies, a stage show, and more created and released in honor of Hyde. Beyond that, a lot of bickering between his family and all the members of his various bands and acts he was producing over who owns what and who gets money, but I'm not even going to get into that. That gets way complicated. Alright, so that is the story of Hyde, Japan's greatest guitarist, and the mystery of how he managed to hang himself with a towel from the bathroom doorknob. And I actually came across that a few times, people being hung from doorknobs. Doorknobs aren't high enough to hang from. Like, you would have to have the strongest material and the tightest knots possible to force yourself across the floor on your knees far enough from the doorknob to actually strangle yourself. So that one always, to me, it sounds like somebody staging a death. Like an assailant choked this person with something, and then to make it look like they killed themselves, they just tied them to a doorknob. You can't really hang yourself from a doorknob. But I guess if you have like a towel around your neck and you just go limp, and you're pulling down on it, yes, you could eventually strangle yourself, and they did say that he was drunk. But, again, we're never going to know. The only people that really know the stories of their death is the person who is dead and cannot tell you. And that's really it's starting to be the most frustrating part of this show for me, as I come across more and more deaths where the cause of death doesn't sound plausible, or it's just unsettled. You know, it starts to get under my skin that we don't know what happened. I like closure and finalization. I like to know the official story of what happened from beginning to end, and more as we do this show, we keep running into all these stories that don't really have an end. So I'm laying there at like 2 a.m. like, I wonder what happened. Albert Dekker didn't choke himself in the bathroom. You know, it's starting to get to me. Not really a lot of time to go into detail on this last story I had lined up, so I'm just going to give you the quick version. Claude Francois, born February 1st, 1939, was a French pop singer, songwriter, drummer, and dancer. And he was a huge pop star in France. Americans are probably familiar with one song of his, but don't even know that it's his. If you know Frank Sinatra's song, My Way, that was actually written by Claude Francois. He sold around 70 million records during his career, and by many in France, he was considered as big as the Beatles. And as most careers are on this show, his was cut short. March 11th, 1978, the day a BBC special he had just finished recording was supposed to air, Claude was taking a shower in his home when he noticed that one of the light fixtures on a nearby wall was crooked. So what do you do when you're in the shower soaking wet and you see something wrong with an electrical outlet? You just reach out and touch it while you're soaking fucking wet. He fried himself to death at 39 years old. And that is it for No Better Death, Dead in the Bathroom. What did we learn? Check your breathing when you're pooping. It may prevent a heart attack or stroke. Don't trust anyone other than a professional dominatrix to tie you up and choke you, because anyone else could be trying to kill you, or you'll fuck around and kill yourself. And it's fun to be choked. It's one of my favorites, but maybe don't make nooses or tie yourself to the doorknob because you're getting into dangerous territory. If you can at all, avoid porta potties. They're nasty, they reek, and apparently no one will attempt to open them for at least 18 hours if you die inside, and that is not really the way you want to be found. And this should go without saying, but apparently needs to be said: don't touch live electrical outlets, wires, or fixtures if you're soaking wet in the shower. This is like, that's day one for a 4-year-old, look what I learned on Sesame Street type shit, right? Just don't do it. NoBetterDeath.info for all info on No Better Death. If you're looking for links to our social media, podcast platforms, show notes, my pointless updates, whatever, it's all right there on the website. Keep telling your friends and leaving the iTunes reviews. It's really helping out. I'm noticing people are starting to be a lot more interactive. Quite a few people sent me the story about the lady getting attacked by the jaguar after the last episode. See what happens when you don't listen to No Better Death? You don't get the 411 on life lessons that you should have already learned. And look, I know sometimes your parents suck and don't teach you things that you should already know. I had drug addict and alcoholic parents who never taught me shit. So there's a lot of common sense things I missed, and I'm not the only one. So hopefully this show helps impart to you some of those lessons you may not have picked up, like don't take selfies with lethal animals. How many of you that listen to this show since the last episode have been attacked or killed taking selfies? None of you. That lady, though, she didn't listen to the show and she got attacked by a jaguar. If you love your friends and family, you will make them listen. If you don't, you're basically signing their death warrant. But yeah, it's cool to see more people interacting with the show, so keep listening, keep spreading the word, and I'll keep coming back here with subpar reporting on things you could easily Google on your own. If there's anything you want to share with me or the audience or anything you want me to cover on the show, hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or nobetterdeath@gmail.com. Again, all contact info is on the website. Still kicking around ideas for a Patreon. I just have to make time to focus on it. And with the new duties I picked up at work, I just haven't had that time. But I will get to it. Thank you for tuning in once again. I am sick. You don't go in the bathroom with me. Grayson, until next time, try not to die.